Hello and welcome to a new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple.
And this is episode 1 of the new era. For those of you who will be listening here in the future, this is Monday the 23rd of March 2020. I don't know if humanity will have survived, but if you can hear this, probably somebody's still running a server somewhere.
I love the story that was going around of it's 2053 and it's a big day for John. He finally gets to use the last toilet roll that his mum bought in 2020.
Yeah, I just finished one roll and I had a little ceremony when I've never been.
I don't want to know what the ceremony was, Paolo.
I've never been so conscious of having this little piece of cardboard and say, oh my God, 1 down, 8 to go.
I know. Yeah, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? I thought you were going to say that this was a new era in the sense that I'm recording on my iPad on Ferrite.
Yeah, you're
for the
right.
First time.
You're
So
right.
if listeners notice any difference, if I'm even less intelligible than normal, that's why.
But we have to compromise. I think that the challenges that we all have to find.
Indeed. Well, it's been really interesting watching, possibly the biggest ever influx into the online world in some respects, certainly in terms of the number of people who are, in some cases for the first time, I guess, working remotely and also just that.
I thought you meant the people who for the first time become experts at the topic they have no idea
Well,
about.
there's that. There's also the it could be accused of being ambulance chasing, just the number of posts you see about 5 top tips for working from home. And but I'm not as harsh as I might be, because I know it's probably freelancers like me who are desperately trying to fill the gaps that have just been left by every bit of booked work they have disappearing overnight.
Yeah, we have been working from home for the last 8 days, and it doesn't really make a huge difference to us, especially considering that some of my team, they're in India, in Switzerland, in Italy, all around. But it does make you a little bit more conscious. The fact that, we used to have Zoom calls with 8 people. Now we have Zoom calls with 15 or more because everybody's working from home. And it's interesting because it gives you, you're connected to somebody's house. And, they are in this, which usually is a private environment. And, there is a whole new etiquette, It's. I was tempted to ask them to show me around. It's like, show me your room, but then I didn't because you said, yeah, maybe it's their room. Why should they show it to me, right?
I know. And it's funny, watching my wife adjusting as well, and she's relatively new in a job, and just the manifestation of office politics in an online world, and just wondering why somebody said the thing they said, and in a way that's not so. It amplifies that nervousness, which isn't the case when you're all in the office at the same time.
Yeah, I guess if you're in the same room, there is also a certain amount of unspoken communication that happens. That suddenly you're out of context. So you're never sure. Am I bothering somebody if I ask them to talk, or is it everybody sitting there waiting for somebody to call? It's I think it's interesting, and but at the same time, I find it very curious how we are evolving very rapidly, in the sense that new protocols are established, new ways of doing things are established. Now that we're forced into this, is actually quite interesting.
And always being half full rather than half empty. One of the upsides of this is going to be not just
we get rid of all the old people. Sorry.
Well, yeah, apart from that, and solving the pension problem. But we, there's the whole thing of watching evolution happening, and just today I noticed that the use of the heart button in Facebook sort of morphing from just being love this to being passing on, sending love to you sort of thing.
Yeah, I saw that comment. I saw that you posted it. Actually, that's how I've always used it.
Right. Okay. So, well, again, maybe it's just my network, but I've definitely seen it begin to change a little bit. And, I've been so heartened. I mean, even just today, somebody who I don't know in real life, as it were, I've only connected with them online, knew that my parents used to live in a small town in Scotland called Straven, and she lives nearby in another small town called Stonehouse. And she just reached out and said, "Are your mum and dad still at home?" In which case, I'm dropping stuff off for my mum and dad. I could do the same for yours, And just huge amounts of that reaching out, and people just being aware of, some of us are used to this, as you say, and being a grumpy old sod. I'm quite happy being on my own. But I've got other friends who I know, well, not on my own, I've got a house full of a bloody family, but, it's not unusual for me. But I know friends who are genuinely struggling with being on their own and missing the connections and the social chat. But it's nice watching people reaching out to help them.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I've been living essentially alone for most of the time for in the last 5 years, and I've never had so many connections last Saturday.
Yes.
I mean, for me, spending the whole weekend only speaking with Siri was not uncommon. And actually on Saturday I heard from my cousin in Australia. I've heard from friends in Italy and here. I mean, and it's good. I mean, I'm not complaining about it. I mean, we're all going to go back to being grumpy bastards when this is over.
Well, will we?
I've
had people saying that, and it's funny. Just even this afternoon, my daughter and I went out for a walk locally, and because we live in the middle of the countryside, and the chances of seeing anybody, never mind getting within 2 meters of them, are slim. But the absence of the airplanes was past remarkable. Much less traffic on the roads. And it may just have been my imagination and the fact that it was a very bright sunny day, but it did seem as if the air was clearer. And I think there are some, and there's obviously been those spoof stories about the dolphins in Venice, but I think there are clearly upsides in terms of our impact on the planet. I saw a lovely Facebook meme that was going around that said, we've been whinging about how hard it is to change our behaviours to prevent global warming. Here's a virus. Practice.
Yeah, I think that it is. I wonder how long does this have to last for, habits to become consolidated.
Well, I had a possibly unacceptable thought the other day there. What is an unacceptable thought, and I'm wary of even mentioning it. But when there was optimism about it maybe not lasting as long as it might have done, to say I felt disappointed is totally wrong. But I sort of thought, oh, God, it'd be a shame if it all just disappeared quickly and we all just shrugged it off as if nothing had happened or nothing has changed.
I guess it all boils down to what is going to happen to the economy in the meanwhile. Something I realized over the last few days, it was like I was aware of it but never really thought about it. It's that I come from a country which is a big producer of food.
Mm-hmm.
We produce a lot of food and we export a lot of food. Now I move to a country which is a big importer of food. Yeah. And suddenly when stuff stops moving around, maybe I was better off on the other side of the border.
And I've banged on for a long time about how fragile the whole just-in-time food infrastructure
ecosystem
is.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much for it to fall over.
But in any case, no, I see what you mean. It's if this lasts long enough, or at least maybe just parts of this will last long enough. We might, services might start coming back, but maybe the whole working from home.
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem about
Mm-hmm.
it? I'm sure that a lot of companies will embrace it because it just makes sense. It's cheaper. You have more time.
Yeah, somebody said it reveals all those meetings that should have been an email.
Yeah, but I think that this will last, and if we, especially in the scenario where we are going to start doing this on and off for the next 18 months, that's plenty of time for people to change their ways.
Not just so I did a post about how people are talking about a big reset, and I was saying, well, it's not ever a big anything. It's a collection of lots and lots and lots of little things. That's how change always happens, and that as individuals, how we're reacting as a family is interesting, and just being a bit more kind towards each other, not taking for granted some of the exchanges is interesting. And just in terms of your own expectations of life not being the way you expect it to, and getting cross and grumpy and bent out of shape, well, you can't afford to do that when you don't have any chances to do anything about it, So in the sense of the other sort of stuff we talk about sometimes on the podcast about just personal perspectives and behaviours, that again for me is quite exciting. It's just forcing people to look inward rather than outward for solutions.
What I hope is that a lot of people being forced at home and to some degree forced online because there is nothing else to do will start doing better in terms of managing feeds of information, because it can be quite overwhelming because it's everywhere. I mean, it's there has been a earthquake in Croatia a couple of days ago.
Oh, right.
And you didn't know, right?
No.
Because nobody's talking about it.
No.
And it was strong enough that actually my in-laws in Trieste heard the shaking.
Oh my goodness!
They felt it.
Wow.
And I went to on the website of the Guardian to find some more information about it, and there was nothing. I mean, I scrolled down, and there was coronavirus, mm-hmm. and that was it. And it was quite, disturbing to some degree to say, this is something happened. I mean, apparently nobody died, but there were some major, or maybe one person died, but it's not been super bad. But, they are in the middle of the same crisis we are into. Can you imagine, first everybody has to say in, and now everybody has to say out, but they need to stay at least 2 meters apart. I mean, can you imagine the layering of the tragedy? And in fact, nobody's talking about it.
Well, and the fact that you're right. I mean, it makes us realise just how filtered the news media is. Well, many of us have realised this for a while, but, it's just making it more apparent how filtered it is. You're right. And also just the perspective of, even down to Trump talking about the Chinese virus. We should pay a penalty. There should be a penalty box that I have to put money in every time we mention Trump on this podcast. But there was somebody talking about a more sensible comment about the choice we're making, in a sense, to put our economies at risk with massive ongoing consequence for the sake of X number of lives. And that the attempt to save those people is inevitably going to compromise and possibly kill other people who've got other things wrong with them, who can't get into hospitals because of the virus. And, is interesting just statistics, how unreliable the statistics are about this, what we collectively decide to do or don't mean, and what we do or don't do about it. It's fascinating.
What I'm hoping is that more people will learn to cope with this, will learn to start managing, after the initial overdose. I've already started to notice people saying, all right, I'll just won't follow the news anymore. I'll do it in a different way. And it's, I think that they are pumping so much stuff right now through the information channels, and it's not good quality information, because it's really just the same thing repeated again and again and again and again, just to grab a little bit of attention. That I mean, some people will just freak out, but I think that some will just say, all right, enough, and start doing much better in terms of, how they're dealing with it.
And it's got that sort of residual guilt still, hasn't it? That I should be listening to the news, it's important and all that sort of stuff. But I always remember Loic Lemur saying that if the news is important, it will find its way to me. And, I think that's increasingly apparent, that if you're in a network of people that are relevant to you, who've got similar challenges and fears to you, then it will, news gets round quite quickly. And we're getting better at deciding what's real news and what's not.
Well, what I hope is that people will also become a little bit more careful about understanding what they say before commenting. And I noticed on
Don't.
your
I know
on your
where you're going
Facebook
with
page
this.
today.
And we probably can't talk about it, but
Well, we're not
okay, so
naming
I'll
names.
maybe tell the story. That
but
there was a funny video of somebody getting hold of various groceries, and it was done in a Mancunian accent. And I suppose you had to listen to the end of it. But this friend of mine just replied and said, "Success." And I thought, does she think it was me that was doing this thing? And so I just said, made some comments. She came back and said, no, it was just nice, all these people reaching out to help you. And she clearly just hadn't got the joke. And if whether she hadn't reached the end of the video or whatever. So I just posted a couple of question marks in response as my brain went numb. And I've almost had as many people laughing at my 2 question marks as the original video. But it just, symptomatic of a problem, I think, Paolo.
yeah, I think that exact. But to be honest, I do that all the time. I mean, I skim an email or I watch a part of a video. I decide what the rest of the video is about, or the rest of the email is about,
true.
and I react to that. I mean, I think we all
Yeah.
do that, probably because we have so much stuff we need to process that we need to. And I mean, in this case, you just exposed. It was funny because it happened in this situation, but it was just a symptom of that. I mean, your friend watched the video and decided what the video was about, regardless of the fact that it was not. The first impression was what really struck, and everything else.
So true.
I think that it is part of us being human. Actually, even if you think about how the brain works, what we see, actually,
totally.
the most of what we see is post-processed, is stuff made up by the brain that has decided that this is what we're actually seeing, interpolating a very small amount of information actually coming from our eyes. And this translates very directly to what is happening today on the internet. You just see something and you decide that this is something. You very quickly need to make a judgment. And of course, a vast majority of time, we are right? Vast majority of the time, it's a good call. But sometimes it's not, and then it becomes funny or sad or something else. I think that it's all about, and this is a topic that we cover all the time, but I think that I hope to see is people being a little bit more in the moment about what is happening, so that even if you're processing a feed, you're always doing that in the context of what is happening to you, and not in what happened in the past, or what might happen in the future. And I think this is more important today than
Totally.
ever.
And I said it's skills that can be learned and practiced. And because I was just reading a book about some of the many ways in which current neuroscience is reasserting things that have been around since Buddhism, but about the left frontal lobe. So it's I've in the past talked about the frontal lobes being the conscious bit of the brain that's retrofitting sense making to previously made decisions, but it's actually the left frontal lobe apparently that's determined to make sense of things. And with people who've had their 2 halves of their brain severed for whatever reason, it will just make up all sorts of crap just to make sense. In complete contrast to what's actually happening around the person whose brain is responding. So it's kind of out of control. And they reckon that's where the ego, that's where the self sits. As I called it the other day, this little thing that sits on your shoulder talking shit in your ears all day. And you're right. I think this is again a sense of optimism for me. Is a number of people who are beginning to understand this and realise this. And there's the double whammy. But if that's true, then none of us are in control, so none of us can get better at it anyway. But I think it's really interesting because I increasingly find free will problematic. But I do think that for whatever reasons, one ends up in a position where you can develop an inclination. And even that inclination is perhaps not even in our control. But collectively, we appear to be heading in larger numbers towards an understanding of how this works. Or not.
I think that probably. I mean, most definitely in our little circle, you do have the feeling there is more attention, more people trying to figure out, people trying to do it on themselves, or try to change behavior, or even simple. So, I mean, I find myself all the time in these days asking people, "Are you right for real?" Like, think about, because you keep talking with people, they are concerned, they have problems, they are scared, and you ask it, okay, think, how are you in this moment?
Yes.
I mean, you're
Yes.
fine, right? You're
Yes.
warm, you ate, you're sitting in a nice room, you have the internet, you're fine, you're just fine. And it's interesting because actually a few people actually sort of realized it, said, yeah, it's interesting. But I think that, I mean, I don't want to stretch the metaphor too much, but something I was thinking this morning is that if you look at the evolution of this disease, it somehow, it almost feel like countries, whole population had the same, this is not happening to me, this is happening to somebody else, so that is irrelevant. I mean, it feels like, Italy did not felt what was happening to China until it started happening to them. And the rest of Europe did not feel what happened to you. It was happening in Italy until, now it starts happening to us here. And it's, it's a side of, not really being present, not being living in its
Living in the head, living in the story.
Own,
yeah.
Living in your own story that makes you think that we're not all humans, we're not all the same,
or not all. I mean, the one that fascinates me is that we're not part of nature, that we're not part of life, and of course the viruses they were here before we were, and the interconnectedness of the ecosphere and pretending barriers. Viruses scoff at barriers. They don't mean anything. The country borders or whatever.
Something I read earlier today was somebody discussing how the language we use to describe this, and we use war as a metaphor, and it was saying it's not a war. We're not at war with somebody else. There is not some evil. Even the way Trump is describing like the evil Chinese virus. I mean, the virus is not evil. The virus is just a part of nature, right? It doesn't care at all. I mean,
there's no
the
volume
virus
judgment
does
being
not
made by
care.
this virus.
So for us hating the virus, the virus doesn't care.
So that's going back to the whole thing about stories and narratives and morals, and a lot of the things I'm reading these days are about how until we're about 2, you just have this sort of unblemished, connected experience of life. You're just part of it, and there's no sense of separate you. And then you get called your name, and it gets repeated, and you begin to think, oh, maybe there's this thing going on inside that's called you, or whatever. And then you begin to build the stories around it. Well, I am or I am like, and then you do that on a, family, village, global, country, global scale. And all of a sudden, all these made up stories that are made on the basis of, as you said earlier, partially filtered, partially perceived, conditioned responses to stuff that actually in this moment has no impact on you whatsoever. And all of that is what causes our problems.
I guess that we wouldn't be here chatting on the internet if there weren't shared stories that pretty much define humanity. I mean, we might be happier and we might be chatting, or we might be.
We'd just be so connected that we wouldn't need any other means, Paolo. We would just know what we both thought.
Yeah, all right. But let's say that, let's call this Plan B, okay? This is where we are. And I think that it is useful to use stories to help people process information, to
Yeah.
to even to some degree to deal with feelings. I guess that the challenge is how you are aware of the fact that these
Yes.
are stories.
Yes.
So as long as you are aware of, you're watching a movie, you feel emotions. It's good, it's interesting, it's exciting, but then the movie's over and you
Just
move
don't
on.
take it
right?
too seriously.
You don't think that the movie was you.
Yeah.
I guess that if we were able to live more stories this way, it would be probably better for all of us. And I'm wondering how much what is happening today and how connected we are through the internet is going to have an impact on this.
For sure. And so the reason I went down on that ramble of the individual growing up and having all those narratives is that once you've constructed that mechanism, if you like, you then have things like religions raising their head and attempts to manage the stories or control the stories, and you end up with moral codes and all those things, and all of those are maintaining the sense of separateness in some sense. That's why you have retributive justice, and because there's a moral blame. But if free will is a myth, then nothing that happens is anybody's fault. It doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable for it, and it doesn't mean you don't sanction people and take them out of your societies to protect the vulnerable. But it sort of takes all that baggage of right and wrong and good and bad. And, one of the things that, again, is this very interesting about this is in a globally connected network facing a globally connected pandemic, this taking sides and deciding who's right and wrong is just stupid.
I find very curious how in my two countries we're dealing very differently with social separation and how and okay, here in the UK we're probably about 2 weeks behind Italy. So in Italy they started the total lockdown exactly tomorrow is 2 weeks ago. And the way they did it was just by literally making it illegal to leave your house. And there is police going around stopping people, asking for papers. Now, I saw the data that they published. Actually, it looks like it's less than 5% of people that are not okay, they are not authorized to be out. So it looked like most Italians are following the rules. Here, there is this moral suasion approach of, the prime minister said that, it really sounded a bit pissed yesterday, so I'm not sure how long this is going to continue. But for the time being, it's just recommending people to stay home, recommending people to be responsible, but nobody is making anything illegal, nobody is prescribing anything. And it's full of people everywhere. I mean, literally, yesterday the parks were full of people. I mean, I look out of the window, there's still plenty of people walking around, and they're not going somewhere they're not going just to buy food. They're just walking the dog or just chatting with a friend. And it's it's interesting how you get to the point where you start thinking, where's a good old police state when you need one?
I don't.
I'm completely in favor of the let's treat everybody as adults, and probably one of the things I like about this country compared to Italy is that you have much more the feeling that we are all treated like adults. We're all given responsibility and then left free to make decisions. But apparently only 24% of people in the UK are following the rules closely, according to I don't know how much believable survey I read early today.
Interesting.
And you start to think, okay, there is in a situation like this one where, I think that there is a lot of maths that people had forgotten about that is coming back. and it is starting to become relevant, right? Because it's 5% don't follow the rule is one thing. Is 75% of people don't follow the rule is completely different. Like in terms of dead bodies in a hospital, and I think we live in an interesting time where, and I guess that the problem is that there is no history in this country of any kind of police state or dictatorship. So I think that I'm not sure which is a consequence of which, but I'm starting to be a little bit concerned about what's going on here, because it's just saying, okay, I'm here. I've left my flat a couple of times in the last 9 days, but it might not be good enough if not enough other people do this.
No, I'm the same. I mean, as I said, we went for a walk in the countryside, but we're in the middle of a field. But very few trips I've had about at the house, and just to get shopping, and like you, kind of stunned at the number of people walking around chatting in the streets as if there was nothing happening.
And again, this is creating all kind of, in Italy, even with what appears to be a very small number of people violating rules, what is going viral are videos of I don't know if you saw it.
So it's right. Is it
of Italian mayors freaking out.
Is it real?
But they appear to be authentic. They appear to be actual mayors of towns around Italy complaining with their citizens.
And that in itself is interesting. Watching Macron, for instance, getting pretty grumpy with the French people, and you think, I'm not sure if grumpy works. It just provokes a reaction. So I don't envy them at all. And it's yet another reason, we all wanted to move to New Zealand already. But the fact that she's managed to close all the borders and it might be the only country left standing at the end of all of this is going to make it even more popular, isn't it? I mean, we
should have moved earlier.
We should.
It might be too late now.
It's going to get bloody crowded, isn't it?
Now everybody will want to move to New Zealand. We can just as well stay here.
That's right, and then they'll all move. And you're right.
Now, if we can get everybody to move to Australia, I think that would be.
There's plenty of space.
Plenty of space, exactly.
Yeah. In a weird way, exciting.
Oh, I think it's very exciting. I mean, I think that we are seeing stuff that, we have not seen for generations.
Yeah.
Because, if you think even at the recent, this is nothing compared to, 9/11 or, big economic crisis. I mean, none of those events had such a reach as this one.
No.
And I think it is revealing things about the nature of people and countries that it's basically forcing through a number of changes that, whether you like it or not, now are going to happen. And given that
the old truism of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger has never been more appropriate.
Yes, absolutely. And it is going to be a very interesting ride. And, hopefully we're going to get out of this better than the way we got in.
Yeah.
My father works with companies in China all the time. And a friend of his was sending him a box of batteries or something that he needed. And she said, I'm going to put some masks in the box now. And, now there is this kind of connection between China and Italy, which is interesting. You say, we are suffering the same things. We're living the same experience.
Totally. And again, just watching a video of a whole plane load of Cuban doctors arriving in Italy. Because Cuba's just got, despite America trying to drag it to its knees, it's got an incredible education system and apparently a very high standard of medical education. So a whole bunch of them have just arrived in Italy. And just the thought of all these clever microbiologists all around the world working really, really hard to come to an answer that as Jeff Jarvis said the other day, would struggle to do so without the internet as well. That level of immediate connectivity and shareability, and even some of the economic impacts and what we do about those, the opportunity for shared learning. And, it's hard to see that this won't have an impact on... the very fact that America is sort of considering universal basic income, who would have thought America would turn socialist under Donald Trump,
I mean, I think that we should think for a second how much the internet is keeping us still together. Yeah. I mean, if this same thing would have happened 20 years ago, we would have been back to the Middle Ages in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
I mean, think how much of the world is still working today because of the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, we've given it for granted, but it's amazing. I was aware that it's a good thing that probably will stay around for a while, but I mean, think how much. I mean, it's not just for research, for people to keep working, people get in touch. Basically, most society is still working because the internet exists.
Yes, and also, I mean, in the Middle Ages, the fear and uncertainty, with people go on about the internet spreading misinformation and fear and whatever else. Yeah, but in the old days, there was no countermeasure to superstition. And things like this were just coming out the blue. There was no explanation for them. There was no understanding of it. And so it was attributed to all sorts of woo-woo.
In the Middle Ages, all you had was fake news. That was the only kind of information I had.
Much
was
of it
fake
emanating
news.
From the church, yeah.
Absolutely. So all you get was fake news. I mean, these days you get plenty of fake news, but also some of the other news.
Totally. And an ability to build to collective sense making and shared responses to things, and a sort of sense of not, paradoxically, a sense of not being alone.
I have a few friends who have been working with the data sets that are available and doing charts and studying and sharing ideas. And, let's forget for a second that actually these data sets are not exactly a very good starting point to understand reality, because they tend to be
all over the shop at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I love the effort of trying to, because I'm doing that too. I download these big tables and then you import them and do little charts. But I love the collaboration coming out and people trying to make sense of this or trying to find signs. And I'm sure that, none of us is an expert. We're just, almost playing. But the effort in trying to understand things better is refreshing.
And even back to something you said at the beginning of maintaining the health of your information networks, this is teaching people a lot. I mean, one of my family shared something the other day there that was in fact pucka, but people weren't sure and were checking it out, sort of thing, and then just coming back and questioning the sources of it. And that's all a huge education learning curve that we're going through at the moment, of being responsible for what you take in and what you put back out again. And again, this is something we've talked about in the podcast a lot, but we currently have millions of people working out that that's an important thing to do. But lives depend on it, literally.
I think that what we are seeing is that there is going to be a growing minority of people becoming much better online and in processing information and helping each other, which is fantastic. I guess that let's hope that, as usually happen in history, this minority will be able somehow to manage the majority. We're just out of the bloody park.
But even if it stays, again, we've talked about this, that this isn't isolated. There's a whole bunch of elements of an old way of looking at the world that are crumbling at the moment. And this will make us react and respond faster and better to some of those challenges. When it becomes really clear that your media is broken, when it becomes really clear that and I'm not, I know people get jumpy when they think you're saying we'll just throw away our government systems. We're not saying that. They're kind of falling apart anyway. It's not a destructive thing. It's more an opportunity that if you're under this much stress and pressure, then you start to work really hard and learn really quickly. And like I say, it's not just going to be a response to this virus that we get out of this. It will, I think, hope change all sorts of aspects of how civilization operates.
Yeah, let's hope. I mean, I'm slightly puzzled around. We all have politicians we're not exactly huge fans of in government. On the other hand, I'm thinking nobody would want to have that job right now.
No. And some of them are really impressive. I mean, some of the civil servants are really impressive.
But to be honest, even some of the politicians, I mean, even the leadership is like, nobody, I think Boris Johnson wanted to be in this situation, let alone the Italian prime minister. Yet they find themselves having to deal with this. And to be honest, I think they're trying their best to do whatever is necessary for a country.
Totally.
I mean, even in America, except for the president, that I think is hopeless. But there is a group of very smart people involved there trying to figure out things. So let's hope that we'll be able to do a second episode in the new year.
That's a good note to end on, I reckon, Paolo.
Well, this is a little bit of a long one, but You all have time.
You've got nothing else to do with your time.
Exactly. So just shut up and recommend this to your friends. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe.
Yeah, and stay well.
And good luck.